So we left off with this question. Is such a scheme of translating what an average premium on such an insurance market would look like for our ideal native versus, and then translating that into a tax, is that doable? And before we can answer that question, we first need to look at what the actual insurance looks like. What am I getting? What am I purchasing when I'm purchasing such a policy? As I said, overall, it's purchasing against the opportunity to make a certain income level in this future society. So what we have is our natives, our immigrants, whatever you want to call them, they have knowledge of what their talents are for the most part, but what they don't have knowledge of is how marketable those talents will be. In other words, what those talents will make them in the economy that results in this society. And so they're making a sort of bet, aren't they, in making insurance, which is based on what kind of life they want to lead. In other words, what kind of talents they want to develop, because each of us have different talents and we maybe could go in different ways depending on what we want to develop based on our ambitions. But also because we might want to develop talents that make us less money or more money. And so it's all about how much money we want to make versus what kind of talents we want to develop in choosing the kind of life that we will feel gives us the most satisfaction. So our natives are then Dworkin imagines a computer, that all of this information is fed into a computer, but also that because the computer, we have good enough technology, we have a computer that knows all the resources and knows how those resources can be developed, and then makes a prediction as to the total GDP of the economy, and then its division among different income levels. And so the computer then predicts how likely it is for people to make income at a certain level, and then gives percentages for that. And so then each native or member of the auction is given a sheet which shows them, okay, here's the 99th percentile income. Maybe 1% of people are going to be able to earn it. In our society, maybe 0.000001% are going to be able to have a chance of earning that. And here's the 50th percentile level income, and so forth. And then each person in the auction then insures at a certain level. In other words, let's say I want to earn about at the 70th percentile. Pretty good income. I'll feel very comfortable, better off than most other people. And so, thus, I'm going to look at policies that insure me at that 70th level. And of course, since the insurance company that's presenting this package to me is going to need to make money, or at least enough money to cover the cost of paying out to me, then the higher the level I insure at, the higher my premium will be. So if I insure at 70th percentile, and let's say 70th percentile in this economy is $70,000 a year, then what that means is that if my talents only give me the opportunity to make 60 at 60th percentile, then the insurance company, I win the bet, the insurance company pays out the difference so that I earn $70,000 a year based on the fact that I insured against the opportunity of making $70,000, but I don't have that opportunity. So let's say, for example, that I lose the bet. And the way I would lose the bet is this, is that I accept the job at $60,000 a year, but I have the opportunity to work at $70,000 a year. Then I would still be paying the premiums because they're insuring against that opportunity. And so, thus, each native, we're asking, what would they insure at? Would it make sense for them to insure at the highest levels? Because what we want is premiums that are low enough that they translate into a tax that is affordable to everybody. Because if such a tax, if the average native would buy at a really high level where the premiums are really high, then it wouldn't be affordable for the poor, and therefore it would defeat the very purpose of this redistribution. So we want something low cost, right? But on the other hand, we want something that insures against something. In other words, is actually worth the premiums that I'm paying. So that it covers at a rate that makes it worth me paying these premiums, even knowing that I may not ever collect on that insurance. And so I want something that protects against a great enough loss that when the payout comes, it was worth all the money I paid in the premiums. So thus, the question is, at what rate would that happen? And Dworkin's going to argue that in fact, the average native, using principles of ideal rationality and economic decision making, would insure at a level that ensures both of these conditions are met. And that the average person would purchase it at that level, at a low enough level, that it would be affordable, but that it would be such that if that average person lost that opportunity to earn at that level, then that average person would not starve and would actually be protected against a great loss in lifestyle. So why would that happen? Well, the key is to show why the average native wouldn't insure at the highest levels, like the 99th percentile or even the 70th percentile. And again, remember the way insurance works. The more coverage you buy, the higher your premiums. So that, let's take for example, I buy car insurance, okay? And normally, if I'm gonna buy a really expensive car, then because I value that car, I think that, that if that car it gets into an accident, then I'm gonna have to pay a lot more to repair it than if I have an old junker. Then I'm going to want to insure more on that more valuable car. But what I'm going to be weighing is, can I afford the insurance payments, the monthly insurance payments, the premiums on that? And so, thus, it's going to be a balancing act between, do I buy enough insurance that when I get into an accident with my Mercedes-Benz, I'm going to be able to afford to get the car fixed to its original level, and I don't lose all that much satisfaction, or do I get the lower level insurance and take the risk that if I get into an accident, I'm not going to have that. And so obviously the average person isn't going to want to buy insurance that's so high that the premiums outweigh the benefits that come from paying those premiums, for two reasons. Well, first of all, wealth itself, this is what I'm insuring against, right? Income. Wealth itself is subject to what is called the law of diminishing returns as far as marginal utility is concerned. Okay? Marginal utility just means the amount of satisfaction I get from purchasing more of the product. So if I purchase, for example, X amount of certain product, I'll get a certain amount of utility and a certain amount of satisfaction from it. But then if I purchase more of that product, do I get a rise in my satisfaction that is proportional to how much more I bought? And the law of diminishing returns says that at a certain level, no, that the more I purchase of the product, that the amount of additional satisfaction decreases. So this happens with income. Studies have shown that at a certain level of income, your happiness doesn't rise along with that income to the same level. And in fact, studies have shown in developed nations like ourselves, like the United States, for example, that you get a maximal amount of satisfaction at around the level of about 80,000 these days, 80,000 a year. If you make about 80,000 a year, then making more than 80,000 isn't going to raise your level of satisfaction in life all that much. And in fact, the more you earn, the less that satisfaction increases, to the point that after 80,000, it really is a negligible increase. So I did a little graph here to show you that. So you can imagine that you're buying insurance income, right? Insurance against making a certain income. And what someone like Dworkin is arguing is that, of course, after the average income level, what's going to happen is it's not going to make sense for you to buy against making much more income, because your satisfaction isn't going to go up, and also your loss isn't going to be greater. So that if I only earn at the average amount of income, but I'm insured at making over here, then my loss is going to be negligible, so that what it pays out is not going to cover the premiums that I'm paying. And it's not going to be worth it. I'm not getting much more for my money. In fact, I'm getting almost nothing for my money. So the argument goes that because of the law of diminishing returns, the rational person will not insure above the average level of income. That's part of it. But also there's another part to this. The higher I insure for, yes, the more likely I'm going to win the insurance lottery, because the more likely that I will not have the talents to make that kind of money comes into play. But if I lose the bet, then I have to keep earning at my maximum level just to afford the premiums, because the premiums will be so high at these higher levels that I won't be able to afford to take a lower job. And that's part of our lifestyle, isn't it? To be able to have a wider range of choices of jobs and things that will make me money, so that I don't always have to be earning my whole life at the top income level and become a premium slave or a slave to paying the premiums. And so what happens though is at the lower levels of insurance, right, at the 50th percentile, obviously the premiums are going to go down because the income is correlated with the talents, the marketable talents. And the lower I go down on the scale of income, the wider range of talents are going to be able to make that kind of income, and therefore the more choice I will have. And so the argument goes that the average person, therefore, will insure at around the 50th to 40th percentile of income. And therefore, even though they have less of a chance of getting payout from their insurance, the premiums will be so low that on the unlikely event that they do lose their job because of their inability to maintain that income level, they will have something that will give them a substantial payout. In other words, think of it like this. If I'm making $90,000 a year and I insured at $70,000 a year, I go down from the $90,000 a year to $70,000 a year. Then it starts to pay out, right? But as far as satisfaction is concerned, the lifestyles aren't all that different. And so really, my gain based on the premiums is negligible. It's a terrible bet. But let's say, for example, I go down from making $70,000 a year to $50,000 a year. Now that cuts into the loss is much greater from, say, 50th percentile to 40th percentile. And so therefore, but the premiums that I'm paying for the 50th percentile are much lower. And so therefore, my payout each month is lower, but also, if I were to lose that opportunity, I would suffer a much greater loss from going 70,000 to 50,000 a year. And therefore, the premiums and the payout are much more worth it. And so, thus he argues that when we get to the lower levels of insuring, we're going to get low enough premiums that they can be affordable for everybody, and we're going to get coverage that is actually, he's going to argue, much higher than the present way in which we set up a social minimum in this country and in Britain. He argues the way we do it in our country right now against underemployment is what is called minimum wage. And obviously in the United States, minimum wage is different in each state. In England, it's going to be different. But if you look at the percentile, in other words, person making minimum wage, at what percentile are they in the income hierarchy? You're going to see that at a much lower percentile of income than what would happen if this insurance tax were set up. And so therefore, he says, his scheme would be affordable and would distribute income in a much more equitable way than what we're doing now with minimum wage. And that is why you might say he's making such an argument. His argument, therefore, is based on a principle of justice, but also on a principle of practicality. The principle of justice is that our income, our overall resources in life should be distributed in such a way that we get all and only what we deserve, you might say, and thus everyone gets an equal distribution. But the way things are now, our social minimum not only doesn't give us what we deserve, but it gives us a lot less. And not only is that not a product of just the fact that this is the best we can get, he argues that in fact, if we would have followed this line of decision making and policy making, we'd be able to get a much more equitable system. And each person would be able to get much more resources, but without being penalized for simply not having the brute luck that someone else has because of their talents.